Commander Ethan Cross stood before the massive viewport of the dropship. His piercing blue eyes locked on the swirling, dense clouds of Nebulin 6. The planet was an enigma, unexplored, untapped, and mysterious. Its location on the outer rim meant that most star charts labeled it simply as unexplored, a designation that only heightened the thrill of discovery. Ethan had been briefed on the planet's remote and dangerous nature, but the details were sparse. What the Federation knew was that the Lumina tribe, an indigenous species, called Nebulin 6 home, and their primitive yet vibrant society had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy for millennia. His mission was simple yet fraught with complexity: establish diplomatic relations with the Lumina tribe, assess their willingness to join the Galactic Federation, and ensure the planet's resources were not jeopardized by any external threats. As the dropship's engines hummed, cutting through the thick atmosphere, the planet's jagged terrain slowly began to come into view. Massive mountain ranges and vast, untamed jungles covered most of the planet's surface. Ethan's fingers tightened around the armrest of his seat, instinctively ready for the challenges ahead. He had seen too many battlefields to be intimidated by such raw, alien beauty, but there was something about Nebulin 6 that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Touchdown in 10 minutes, Commander. The pilot's voice came through the comm system, breaking Ethan's concentration. He nodded without speaking, adjusting his tactical vest. The jungle heat was brutal and unforgiving. He'd long ago learned to dress for function, not fashion. His bare arms, adorned with tribal ink that marked his past victories and battles, reflected in the glass as the dropship began its descent. The markings, though worn and faded, still made an impression on any primitive species he encountered. "Remember, Ethan," the voice of Admiral Holt crackled over the comms. "This is strictly reconnaissance. Your job is to make contact with the Lumina, assess their culture, and report back. Don't start any interplanetary incidents. And, for the love of the stars, try not to seduce any alien princesses this time." Ethan chuckled to himself. It wasn't the first time he'd been teased about his previous diplomatic encounters. That one time with a noblewoman from a distant planet still haunted his reputation. But it had been, admittedly, a memorable experience. "That was one time, sir, and technically, she was a duchess," he replied with a grin. The ship touched down with a soft thud in a small clearing. The hiss of the door opening released a wave of humid air, filled with the smell of alien flora and distant, unfamiliar creatures. Ethan grabbed his pack and slung it over his shoulder, stepping out into the untamed wilderness of Nebulin 6. The lush jungle spread out before him, a sea of green and vibrant colors that seemed almost alive, pulsating with energy. Alien vines twisted around the trees, their surfaces shimmering under the faint light, while flowers with glowing petals tracked his every movement, almost as if watching him. The jungle was full of life, but also full of danger. The faint rustling in the underbrush made his hand hover near his sidearm. But he moved forward with determination. His mission was not to fight but to understand. He was a diplomat, not a soldier, and his task was to build bridges between species, not burn them down. As he made his way toward the Lumina village, the landscape around him began to change. The jungle grew denser, but after an hour of trekking, he finally caught sight of the village. The structures were organic, grown rather than built, with glowing bioluminescent patterns adorning their surfaces. It was both beautiful and eerie, a testament to a culture that lived in harmony with its environment. Riker's thoughts were interrupted by the sharp voices of the village guards. Tall and imposing figures with skin the color of turquoise and markings that shimmered like the stars. They stood at the perimeter of the village, their eyes assessing the outsider with cautious curiosity. "Halt," one of the guards called out in surprisingly fluent Standard. "Identify yourself, outsider." Ethan raised his hands in a universal gesture of peace, his posture open and non-threatening. "Commander Ethan Cross, Galactic Federation. I come with greetings and an offer of friendship." The guards exchanged glances, their bioluminescent markings pulsing slightly. Finally, the lead guard nodded. The chief was expecting a Federation envoy. "Follow me." As Ethan was escorted through the village, he felt dozens of curious eyes following him. The Lumina were humanoid but had distinct differences: elongated limbs, feline-like grace, and bioluminescent markings that seemed to tell the story of their people. Then, his eyes met hers. Lena. She stood at the entrance of a larger structure in the center of the village. Her silvery hair cascaded over her shoulders, glowing in the soft light of the village's bioluminescence. Her eyes, a deep ocean blue, studied him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, as though she could see right through him. The tension between them was palpable, and it wasn't lost on Ethan. She was not just another native, there was something about her, her presence, her intelligence, that intrigued him immediately. But he had a job to do, and getting lost in personal distractions could derail everything. "Welcome, Commander Cross." A deep voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to find Chief Marcus Thorne, a tall and broad-shouldered figure, his chest covered in elaborate bioluminescent markings. "I am Chief Marcus Thorne of the Lumina. We have heard tales of humans but have never hosted one in our village. This is a historic day." Ethan nodded respectfully. "The honor is mine, Chief Thorne. The Federation hopes to establish peaceful relations with your people." Thorne's face softened. "You will stay with us. Learn our ways," he said. "My daughter Lena will show you to your quarters." Lena stepped forward, her movements graceful but deliberate. Ethan noticed how her eyes never left his, as if she were studying him carefully, weighing whether or not he could be trusted. She turned without another word and led him toward a small, humble dwelling at the edge of the village. As they walked, the tension was still thick between them. "You don't approve of my being here," Ethan said, breaking the silence. Lena glanced at him briefly. "My father is too trusting of outsiders," she replied in a cool tone. "The last visitors to our world took without asking. Why should you be different?" "Because I'm asking," Ethan said with a smile. "And because I understand the value of respect." Her eyes flickered with something, curiosity, maybe even a hint of respect, but she said nothing more as she led him to his quarters. Her warning lingered in his mind as she left. "Our jungle has many dangers. Do not wander alone." As night fell and the village was bathed in soft blue light, Ethan stood at the doorway of his quarters, looking out into the jungle. In the distance, a deep, guttural roar echoed through the trees. Something large and predatory stalked the outskirts of the village, and it made the hairs on his neck stand up. He smiled to himself. Danger had never been something he ran from. But this mission, this place, felt different. The journey had only just begun. Commander Ethan Cross moved deeper into the heart of the Lumina village, his every step causing the bioluminescent markings on the surrounding structures to glow brighter in the fading twilight. He was keenly aware of the eyes that followed his every movement, eyes that were both curious and cautious. The Lumina were a proud and ancient species, and he was an outsider in their midst. He had come with peaceful intentions, but he could not deny the weight of their suspicion. As he passed through the village's entrance, the environment shifted from wild jungle to a place that seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a reflection of the unique connection the Lumina had with their land. The architecture was unlike anything he had seen before, structures grown from the planet's flora rather than constructed, their surfaces glowing with intricate bioluminescent patterns that shifted and pulsed with the rhythm of the surrounding environment. It was a breathtaking sight, but Ethan's focus remained on the task at hand. His guide, Lena, led him through the village, her presence as commanding as it was enigmatic. Her silver hair shimmered in the bioluminescent light, and her turquoise skin seemed to glow softly, marking her as someone of significant importance. But it wasn't just her striking appearance that caught Ethan's attention. It was the intensity in her blue eyes, a sharp gaze that seemed to both assess and distrust him at once. He could feel the walls she had built around herself, a fortress of caution and skepticism. "You must have many questions, Commander Cross," Lena said after several moments of silence, her voice cold but not unkind. "But before you ask anything, know this. The Lumina do not trust easily. Our people have been betrayed by outsiders before. We have no reason to believe you will be any different." Ethan stopped in his tracks, meeting her gaze with unwavering calm. He understood her suspicion. It was a natural response, especially after the history her people had endured. "I don't expect you to trust me right away," he said, his voice steady. "But I've come here to learn, not to take, to understand, not to conquer." Lena's expression hardened, though there was a flicker of something, perhaps doubt, perhaps curiosity, in her eyes. She turned away and continued walking, leading him to a small dwelling at the edge of the village. It was humble, but functional, offering a quiet respite from the bustle of village life. She stopped at the entrance and turned to face him. "Tomorrow, you will meet with my father, Chief Marcus Thorne. He is the leader of our people, and it is he who will decide whether you can stay or not. But do not expect easy approval. Commander Cross, we do not give our trust lightly." Ethan nodded, recognizing the weight of her words. "I understand." For a moment, Lena hesitated, as though weighing whether or not to say something more. Her markings flickered with subtle shifts, betraying her inner thoughts, though she kept her expression carefully neutral. "I'm only warning you, Commander, because I care about my people," she said softly. "Our history with outsiders is filled with pain. You may not be like the others, but your presence here is not without risk." Her words struck a chord with Ethan. He had heard of the Lumina's cautious nature, but hearing it from Lena, someone who clearly held the well-being of her people close to her heart, made it all the more real. He knew that gaining her trust, let alone the trust of her people, would not be an easy task, but there was something in her eyes, something that made him believe they could overcome this mutual suspicion. "I won't let anyone harm your people, Lena," Ethan said quietly, his voice carrying a sincerity that surprised even him. "I promise you that." Lena's gaze softened ever so slightly, though she quickly masked it with a more guarded expression. "We shall see, Commander." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan to settle into the small dwelling. As he unpacked his gear and prepared for the long night ahead, his mind couldn't help but wander back to the brief exchange he had just had with Lena. There was something about her, her strength, her resilience, her unwavering protectiveness over her people, that stirred something within him. He couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her, though he knew better than to let that distraction cloud his judgment. His mission was far from over, and he had to stay focused. Yet, in the quiet of the night, with the sounds of the jungle outside his window, Ethan found himself thinking about Lena more than he had expected. Meanwhile, Lena walked away from the dwelling with a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She had been raised to be cautious of outsiders, to view them as potential threats. Yet there was something different about this human, something that made her hesitate, something that made her question everything she had ever been taught. As she made her way back to the village center, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that her life, and the fate of her people, might be forever changed by this unexpected encounter. But for now, she kept her thoughts to herself, locking them away behind the walls she had carefully constructed over the years. She couldn't afford to let down her guard. Not yet. But deep inside, a small seed of doubt had been planted, a doubt that would only grow stronger as the days went on. The sun was just beginning to rise over Nebulin 6, casting long shadows across the dense jungle as Commander Ethan Cross stepped cautiously into the wild. The morning air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of alien creatures echoed in the distance. It was a beautiful but dangerous place, and Ethan knew it was not wise to venture alone. But something about the previous night's roar, the primal growl that reverberated through the jungle, had piqued his curiosity. It was the same sound that had haunted him in the quiet hours before dawn, and he couldn't ignore the urge to find its source. He had been briefed about the Azure Phantom, a creature of terrifying power and size, known to the Lumina as both protector and destroyer. The legends spoke of its ferocity, its ability to kill any hunter who dared to approach. To the Lumina, it was both a symbol of fear and reverence, a force of nature that defined their way of life. As Ethan trekked deeper into the jungle, he could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in on him. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, the dense foliage alive with movement, its hidden secrets just beyond reach. He had encountered many dangerous creatures in his career, but nothing quite like this. The Azure Phantom was unlike anything he had ever heard of, both a myth and a reality. A force that could shape the destiny of this world. After nearly an hour of navigating through thick underbrush and towering trees, Ethan came to a small clearing. The jungle opened up before him, revealing a serene, almost sacred landscape. A crystal-clear stream trickled through the middle, the water sparkling in the early morning light. It was here, beside the stream, that he saw it, the Azure Phantom. It was massive, its fur shimmering with an ethereal glow that seemed to ripple like liquid starlight with every movement. The creature resembled a tiger, but its 6 muscular legs, dual prehensile tails, and sleek, feline grace made it seem almost alien. Its violet eyes caught the light as it lifted its head from the water, nostrils flaring as it scented the air. The moment their eyes locked, Ethan felt an intense connection, a sense of ancient wisdom and wild power radiating from the creature. Ethan stood perfectly still, not out of fear, but out of respect. He knew enough about predators to understand that sudden movements could provoke an attack. But there was something different about this moment, something that called to him deep within. He wasn't here to fight the beast, he was here to understand it. For several long seconds, they remained locked in a silent stare, the jungle around them holding its breath. The phantom growled softly, its massive form rippling with tension. Ethan remained motionless, his hand resting lightly on the sidearm at his waist. But he did not draw it. Instead, he lowered his body slightly, keeping his posture open and non-threatening. "Easy," Ethan murmured, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to hurt you." The beast's growl softened, though its body remained tense, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. But instead of attacking, it took a tentative step forward. Then another. It was moving cautiously, as if trying to assess the human before it. Ethan remained still, allowing the creature to approach at its own pace. He had faced countless predators in his career, but this was different. The phantom was not attacking, it was exploring, trying to understand him as much as he was trying to understand it. When the creature was just a few meters away, Ethan did something that would have been unthinkable to most, a gesture that would have gotten any other explorer killed. He extended his hand, palm up, toward the phantom. The creature stopped, its violet eyes studying him intently. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with surprising gentleness, the azure phantom sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring as it tested the scent of the human. Ethan remained completely still, even as the creature's massive head neared his hand. He didn't know why he was doing it, but he trusted his instincts. There was no aggression in the air, only an unspoken connection between them. The phantom leaned in closer, its warm breath brushing against Ethan's hand. He could feel the heat radiating from the creature's body, the wild power that lay just beneath the surface. Yet, despite the danger it posed, there was something strangely comforting about the interaction. "You're not so scary, are you?" Ethan whispered softly, almost as if speaking to a nervous animal rather than a deadly predator. He spoke with the same tone he would use to calm a frightened creature, gentle, reassuring. To his astonishment, the phantom made a low, rumbling sound deep in its chest, not unlike a purr. Ethan's hand hesitated for only a moment before he reached forward, slowly and carefully, to stroke the creature's fur. It felt smooth, like silk, and the subtle glow of the fur seemed to ripple under his touch. As if responding to him, the beast let out another soft purr, pushing its massive head into his hand, seeking the attention. At that moment, Ethan understood something profound. The phantom was not a mindless killing machine. It was a creature with its own fears, its own instincts, and perhaps its own loneliness. It was guarding its territory, but it was not evil. It was simply acting in the way nature had taught it. Before he could process the full weight of this understanding, he heard a voice behind him. By the sacred moons, Ethan turned to see Lena standing at the edge of the clearing. Her wide eyes locked on the scene before her. She was speechless, her bioluminescent markings flickering with what appeared to be a mixture of disbelief and alarm. She had witnessed the impossible. The human, an outsider, had somehow tamed the azure phantom. The creature's violet eyes shifted toward Lena, its body tensing once again. But instead of attacking, it remained where it was, its attention now divided between the two of them. Ethan stepped back slowly, not wanting to provoke the beast. "I think he's just lonely," Ethan said quietly, not taking his eyes off the creature. He wasn't entirely sure why he said it, but it felt true. The phantom seemed less like a monster and more like a misunderstood guardian of the jungle. Lena approached cautiously, her eyes still locked on the creature. She seemed frozen for a moment, processing what she had just witnessed. "You tamed our apex predator," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "The azure phantom. It's been the terror of our tribe for generations. No one has ever dared. Ethan smiled faintly, feeling the weight of her words. I didn't tame him, he said softly. I just approached him the way we should approach everything, with respect. Lena stepped closer, her cautiousness slowly giving way to a curious wonder. But how? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Our greatest warriors have tried to kill him. None have succeeded. Maybe that's the problem, Ethan replied, lowering his hand from the phantom's head and turning to face her. They saw him as a monster to be conquered, instead of a being to be understood. Lena's expression softened, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. Her bioluminescent markings, which had been pulsing with alarm, now flickered with a gentler glow. She looked at Ethan in a new light, her skepticism beginning to fade as she saw him not as an invader, but as a bridge between worlds. For the first time, the phantom let out a satisfied rumble. Lying down beside Ethan, its massive body relaxed and calm, Lena took another cautious step forward, reaching out hesitantly, as her fingers brushed against the phantom's shimmering fur. The creature stirred but did not react with hostility. It was as if, for the first time in its life, it was being treated not as a threat, but as a companion. Ethan glanced at Lena, the connection between them silently deepening. This moment, this unexpected alliance with the Azure Phantom, was not just about survival, it was about forging a deeper understanding between two worlds. The days following Ethan's encounter with the Azure Phantom were filled with a growing tension between Lena and the outsider. Though she had witnessed something impossible, Ethan's ability to connect with the beast without violence or aggression, she remained cautious. Unsure of his true intentions, he was still a human, an outsider, and despite his calm demeanor, she couldn't shake the deep-rooted distrust she had been raised with. The history of her people was full of betrayal, and she was unwilling to let her guard down, even for someone like him. But as the days passed, Lena couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in the way Ethan interacted with the world around him. His respect for the jungle, the creatures, and even the Lumina people was evident in every action he took. It wasn't just about diplomacy or completing his mission, it was about something deeper. He genuinely wanted to understand, to learn, and to build trust, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. One evening, as Lena watched him from the edge of the village, she saw him again, standing at the edge of the clearing. His body relaxed, his hands gently brushing against the leaves of the nearby plants. He wasn't just standing guard or trying to assert his authority. He was simply taking the time to connect with the environment, the same way he had connected with the Azure Phantom. His demeanor was calm, unthreatening, and deeply respectful. She had never seen anyone approach the jungle like this before. Most outsiders came to conquer, to take what they could. But Ethan, he was different. He seemed to understand something she hadn't expected him to understand. It was as if he viewed Nebulin 6 not as a resource to be exploited, but as a living, breathing entity worthy of respect. Her thoughts were interrupted when Ethan approached her one evening, his footsteps light against the soft ground. He had noticed her standing there, as if waiting for a sign. The tension between them had always been palpable, but in that moment, something shifted. "You're quiet tonight," he remarked, his voice easy, as though he had known her for much longer than they actually had. "You've been watching me a lot lately." Lena stiffened, caught off guard by his observation, but she didn't pull away. She was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him, even though she still felt the weight of the barriers between them. "I was just thinking," she said, her voice softer than she had intended, "about your connection with the Phantom. How did you do it?" Ethan turned slightly toward her, the flickering light from the village casting shadows across his face. He didn't look at her with any expectation, but instead with genuine curiosity. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," he replied. "I just approached him with respect, the same way I approach everything in this world. You can't expect to live in harmony with something if you see it as an enemy." Lena's gaze fell to the ground, her thoughts racing. She had always seen the Azure Phantom as a threat, something that had to be driven away or destroyed. Her father, Chief Marcus Thorne, had spent years leading the Lumina tribe with that mindset. But Ethan's words struck her in a way she hadn't anticipated. What if? What if they had been wrong all along? "What do you really want here, Commander Cross?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question had been on her mind for days, ever since she had witnessed his interactions with the Phantom and the way he treated everything around him. Ethan met her gaze, his expression serious yet kind. "I want to learn about your people, Lena. I want to understand how the Lumina live in this world, how you've managed to coexist with it. The Federation sees value in your culture, your way of life, but I also see it as a privilege. Not something to take, but something to protect." Lena's chest tightened at his words. A mixture of disbelief and something else, something softer, more vulnerable. Could it really be that simple? Could this human truly want to protect their way of life, not just exploit it? "You're different," she said, almost to herself. "You're not like the others." Ethan's eyes softened as he stepped closer, but he respected the space between them. "Maybe not. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to learn, if you let me." For the first time, Lena didn't feel the overwhelming weight of skepticism. She felt something else, something she hadn't expected to feel: hope. As the days passed, Lena found herself noticing more about Ethan than she ever had before. The way he interacted with the Lumina people, always with patience and care, never trying to impose his ways. The way he spent hours in the jungle, learning its rhythms, its creatures, and its secrets. And the way he treated her, not as an object of curiosity, but as an equal. But it wasn't just his actions that affected her. It was the quiet strength in his words, the way he held himself, the way he respected everything he came into contact with. Slowly, she found her reservations about him begin to dissolve, replaced by a feeling she didn't fully understand. The way he spoke of the Federation, not as a tool for dominance, but as a means to protect, resonated deeply with her. It was as if he saw the world the way she did, as a delicate balance, not something to be taken or controlled. One evening, as they stood together near the village's edge, watching the bioluminescent lights of the jungle come to life, Lena found herself saying something she hadn't planned to say. "You've changed my mind about you, Ethan Cross," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of the jungle. "I never thought an outsider could understand us. But I think you might." Ethan turned to her, his gaze steady and warm. He didn't say anything right away, but in the quiet between them, Lena could feel a shift. It was subtle, but undeniable. The walls that had separated them were crumbling, piece by piece, replaced by something deeper. "I'm glad you think so," he said quietly. "I hope I can prove it to you." And in that moment, Lena realized that her feelings for him had changed too. It wasn't just respect anymore, it was something more. Something she hadn't expected. Something that, despite her fears and doubts, was beginning to feel like love. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way for their worlds to come together. The peaceful atmosphere of Nebulin 6, which had been carefully cultivated by the Lumina for generations, was shattered by the unmistakable hum of machinery cutting through the jungle. The rumble echoed in the air, vibrating the ground beneath the villagers' feet, signaling the arrival of something far more menacing than they had ever anticipated. It began with a series of unmarked ships descending through the thick atmosphere, their sleek, metallic forms cutting through the clouds like sharp knives. The Federation had warned of corporate interests in uncharted territories, but no one had expected a full-scale invasion so soon. The ships landed with a thunderous boom in the northern valley of Nebulin 6. Their arrival marking the beginning of a new and terrifying chapter in the planet's history. Ethan Cross had been out in the jungle when he first heard the noise. At first, he thought it was just another natural occurrence, maybe some of the planet's immense wildlife, or the sound of distant thunder. But as the noise grew louder, he quickly realized something was amiss. He immediately set off toward the source, his instincts as a soldier kicking in. He knew this wasn't the work of nature. When he arrived at the clearing near the northern valley, the sight before him confirmed his worst fears. A massive operation had already begun. Mining vehicles and heavy machinery, the kind Ethan had seen in his travels across the galaxy, were tearing into the earth, their massive drills sinking into the soil, pulling up valuable resources with terrifying efficiency. The crew of Nexus Industries, armed with advanced weaponry and clad in the sterile, utilitarian suits of corporate employees, moved about the site with alarming precision. These people were not here to explore or understand the planet. They were here to exploit it. And from the looks of it, they had no interest in respecting the ecosystem or the people who lived on it. Ethan's heart sank as he took in the devastation. The mining machines were churning through the land, digging up the very veins of luminite, an incredibly rare and powerful mineral that the Lumina had long lived in harmony with. The glowing blue veins of luminite pulsed beneath the surface, a gift from the planet that had connected the Lumina, the Azure Phantom, and the very heart of Nebulin 6. The mineral was not only precious to the Lumina, it was the lifeblood of their culture, their connection to the land, and even to the Phantom itself. If this mining continued, the balance between all living things on Nebulin 6 would be shattered. Ethan's communicator buzzed in his ear, and he heard Lena's voice crackling through, tinged with alarm. Commander Cross, we've detected unusual activity near the Northern Valley. What's happening out there? Ethan's voice was grim as he responded. It's not good. Nexus Industries has arrived. They're here to mine luminite. Lena's sharp intake of breath echoed through the calm. No, that can't be. They can't just take it. The luminite is sacred to us. I know, Ethan replied. I'm heading back to the village now. We need to figure out how to stop this before it's too late. The urgency in his voice matched the pounding of his heart. He knew the Lumina would never stand for this. Their connection to the land, to the Azure Phantom, and to the luminite was too deep. This wasn't just about a resource, this was about their survival, their culture, and their way of life. As Ethan made his way back to the village, the situation grew increasingly dire. The sound of the mining equipment grew louder. The once peaceful hum of the jungle now drowned out by the mechanical roar of Nexus Industries. The miners were cutting through the forests, clearing paths for more machinery, and poisoning the land with their relentless pursuit of wealth. By the time he arrived, the Lumina had already begun to gather. Chief Marcus Thorne stood at the forefront, his broad shoulders tense, his bioluminescent markings flashing with agitation. The rest of the village was in an uproar, their normally peaceful demeanor replaced by fear and anger. Lena was there too, her face a mixture of shock and determination. Ethan, she said quickly, we need to act. If Nexus continues this, we'll lose everything, the Phantom's territory, the luminite, our connection to the planet. Ethan nodded gravely. I've seen what they're doing out there. They're tearing the land apart to get at the luminite. They won't stop until they've stripped everything from this planet. Lena stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. We can't let them do this. We must protect Nebulin 6. The Lumina had always lived in harmony with their world, using the natural resources around them without taking more than they needed. But this was an existential threat. The arrival of Nexus Industries was not just an attack on their land, it was an assault on their very existence. Chief Marcus Thorne spoke, his voice deep and commanding. We must unite against this threat. These outsiders cannot be allowed to desecrate our sacred land. They think they can take from us without consequence. But we will show them the strength of the Lumina. Ethan watched as the Lumina warriors, their markings glowing fiercely with determination, gathered around the chief. The sense of unity in the air was palpable, and Ethan couldn't help but feel a deep respect for these people. They had lived in balance with this planet for so long, and now they were fighting to protect it. We won't let them destroy our world, Lena said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. But we need help. We need to find a way to stop them before it's too late. Ethan's mind raced as he thought of their options. The Lumina were powerful, their connection to the planet and the Azure Phantom giving them an advantage. But Nexus Industries had resources, technology, and weapons that the Lumina couldn't match. It would take more than force to stop them, it would take strategy, unity, and a deep understanding of Nebulin 6's delicate balance. We'll fight, Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve. But we'll fight smart. We'll need to use everything we have, our knowledge of the land, our connection to the Phantom, and the luminite itself. We can't let Nexus destroy what makes this planet unique. Lena nodded, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, they both understood the stakes. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight to preserve the very soul of Nebulin 6. As the Lumina prepared for what was to come, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the battle they were about to face would change everything, not just for Nebulin 6, but for the relationship between their two worlds. The arrival of Nexus Industries had set the stage for an inevitable conflict. And only by working together could they hope to protect the planet from those who sought to exploit it. The time for peaceful diplomacy was over. Now, it was a matter of survival. As the shadow of Nexus Industries loomed ever closer, the tension within the Lumina village grew more palpable with each passing day. The machines, the hum of the mining equipment, and the presence of armed corporate soldiers were a constant reminder that their way of life was in jeopardy. But amidst the growing chaos and mounting danger, there was one thing that remained undeniable. The bond between Ethan Cross and Lena had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. It all began during a quiet moment, away from the chaos of the village preparations. After a long day of strategizing, Ethan found himself standing alone at the edge of the village, gazing into the jungle. The night air was cool, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures filling the silence. His thoughts were heavy, the weight of the upcoming conflict pressing on him. It wasn't just the fight against Nexus that troubled him, it was the realization that he had begun to care for Lena in a way that went beyond duty. Beyond friendship. Lena, having been busy with the village's preparations, approached him silently, her soft footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth. She had been watching him for days, noticing the way he held himself, the way his calm presence seemed to soothe the anxiety of the Lumina. She knew, just as well as he did, that the fight ahead would be difficult. Yet, she couldn't deny the strange, inexplicable connection that had begun to grow between them. She stood beside him for a moment, her eyes scanning the jungle before speaking, her voice soft but filled with an undercurrent of urgency. "I didn't think it would come to this," she said, her gaze lingering on the distant glow of the mining operation. "We've fought for so long to protect Nebulin 6. And now, we're facing an enemy we can't just fight off with strength alone." Ethan turned to her, his blue eyes searching her face. There was a vulnerability there, something she didn't often show. He had always admired her strength, her leadership, but now, in the quiet of the night, he saw something else in her, a shared fear, a recognition that the weight of what they were about to face could break them both. "I know," Ethan replied, his voice steady, though it carried a hint of regret. "I didn't expect it to happen like this either. But we're not alone in this. Lena, we have the Lumina, and we have each other." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The jungle seemed to hold its breath as the tension between them grew. Not from the threat of Nexus, but from something deeper, something more personal. They had both come to realize that the connection between them had shifted over time. What had begun as a tentative alliance, based on respect and a shared goal, had evolved into something neither could ignore. Lena turned toward him, her silvery hair catching the moonlight, her bioluminescent markings glowing softly in the dim light. "Ethan," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know how this happened, but I can't stop thinking about you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy fog. He had felt the same pull, but had kept it buried, unsure of how to navigate the complex emotions that had taken root in him. He had been a soldier, a diplomat, trained to keep his emotions in check. But with Lena, it was different. The walls he had carefully built around his heart were beginning to crumble. And he found himself unable to resist the pull of something that felt so natural. "So right, you're not alone in that," he said, his voice low, his gaze intense. "I've felt it too, from the moment we met." Lena looked up at him, her blue eyes meeting his, searching for something, validation, perhaps, or confirmation that what they both felt wasn't just the result of the overwhelming circumstances they found themselves in. In the quiet night, there was nothing but the two of them, standing together against the backdrop of the world that seemed to be falling apart. Without a word, Ethan stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. He reached out, his hand gently brushing against her cheek, the warmth of her skin sending a jolt of electricity through him. Lena's breath caught, her gaze softening as she leaned into his touch. She had always been the protector, the one who carried the burden of responsibility. But in that moment, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to let down her guard. The connection between them was undeniable. It wasn't just physical, it was something deeper. A spiritual bond forged in the fires of shared struggle and mutual respect. They had fought side by side, strategized together, and learned to trust each other in ways that were rare and precious. And now, in the midst of the impending battle, they found solace in each other's presence. Lena took a small step forward, closing the distance between them, her hands resting gently on his chest. "I never thought I'd feel this way," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "I've always been focused on protecting my people, on protecting Nebulin 6, but now, I'm afraid of what might happen if we don't succeed. And I'm afraid of losing you." Ethan's heart swelled with emotion at her words. He understood the weight of her fear, the fear of losing everything she had fought so hard to protect. The fear of losing him, the only person who had come into her life and shared her vision for the future. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently caressing her skin as he looked into her eyes with all the love and affection he had kept hidden for so long. "You won't lose me, Lena," he said softly, his voice full of conviction. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together, I promise you that." In that moment, there was no more fear, no more uncertainty. The world outside, with all its chaos and danger, seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them standing together in the quiet of the night. And as their lips met in a tender kiss, all the weight of their shared experiences, their fears, and their hopes for the future came together in that one perfect moment. The kiss was slow, deliberate, as if they were both savoring the connection they had longed for but never dared to express. It was a promise, a declaration of their commitment to each other and to the planet they both loved. In each other's arms, they found a sense of peace they hadn't known they needed, a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, love had the power to bring them strength. As they pulled away, their foreheads rested against each other, both of them breathing deeply, grounding themselves in the warmth of the other's presence. "We'll fight for this," Lena whispered, her hands still resting on his chest. "We'll fight for everything we love." Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "For Nebulin 6, for us." And in that quiet moment, the bond between them became unbreakable, stronger than any force that could threaten their world. They would face the coming battle together, not just as allies, but as something far more powerful, as two souls intertwined, ready to protect the future they were both beginning to build. The tension in the air around the Lumina village had reached a boiling point. The arrival of Nexus Industries had thrown the fragile peace of Nebulin 6 into chaos. Every day, more mining machines were driven deeper into the jungle, tearing up the land that the Lumina and the Azure Phantom held sacred. The distant sound of drills and crushers became a constant reminder of the imminent destruction that loomed over the planet. Ethan Cross had seen enough. Despite their best efforts, Nexus Industries showed no signs of backing down. The corporation was determined to extract the precious Luminite, no matter the cost to the ecosystem or the lives of the Lumina. The stakes had never been higher, both for the survival of the Lumina people and for his own mission. What began as a diplomatic mission to build peace had turned into a desperate fight to protect the soul of Nebulin 6 from corporate greed. On a crisp morning, after hearing the rumble of the mining machines growing louder in the distance, Ethan received word from Lena. The time had come for a confrontation. Nexus Industries, led by its unyielding CEO, Victor Harlow, had decided to hold an official meeting with the Lumina to present their final offer for the rights to the planet's resources. Ethan and Lena made their way to the clearing at the edge of the village where the Lumina had gathered to meet Harlow and his team. The village was unusually quiet, the air thick with anxiety. The Lumina warriors stood tall, their bioluminescent markings flickering nervously in the growing tension. Chief Marcus Thorne was already there, his posture rigid and defiant, his eyes burning with the resolve to protect his people. As the sleek corporate vehicles came into view, their engines whirring, the sight of Victor Harlow stepping out of the lead vehicle sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Harlow, impeccably dressed in a crisp, white suit, exuded the confidence of a man used to getting what he wanted. His sharp features and cold demeanor stood in stark contrast to the natural beauty of Nebulin 6. Behind him, a team of corporate security guards flanked the area, their weapons holstered but ready. Harlow's eyes scanned the gathered Lumina, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. "Chief Thorne," he greeted with a forced smile. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person. I must say, your village is quite picturesque. But unfortunately, It's time for you to come to terms with reality. Lena, standing beside Ethan, stiffened at his words. Ethan could sense her anger but also the underlying fear. The fear that their peaceful way of life was on the verge of being shattered forever. It was clear that the Lumina were not going to bend to the corporate giant's will without a fight. Chief Thorne stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity. We have already made our stance clear. The Luminite is not for sale. And our land will not be violated by your machines. You cannot take what is ours. Harlow's smile never faltered, but there was a coldness in his eyes that Ethan recognized as the mark of a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. I understand your reluctance, Chief, but let's be clear, this is not just about business. The Federation is already aware of our intentions here, and we have every right to access these resources. Your resistance is a trivial matter in the grand scheme of things. Lena stepped forward, her voice filled with conviction. You don't understand the stakes here. The Luminite is not just a resource, it's the foundation of everything we are. It connects our people, our land, and even the Azure Phantom. You cannot just take it and expect no consequences. Harlow's eyes flickered with a hint of irritation, but he quickly masked it. And what consequences are those? Exactly? The Federation won't stop us. You'll have your compensation, your protection, and your people will be safe. You're just being stubborn for no reason. Ethan couldn't stay silent any longer. He stepped forward, his voice firm. You think you can just come in and take whatever you want without understanding what you're disrupting. The Azure Phantom, the Lumina, the entire ecosystem, none of it is yours to claim. This isn't a transaction. This is life and death for Nebulin 6. Harlow turned to him, his lips curling into a smirk. And who are you to lecture me about life and death? Commander Cross? You're an outsider, just like me. Don't think for a second that your Federation will back you up here. If anything, they'll be eager to see us take control of this planet. The tension was thick as both sides stared each other down, the weight of the conflict settling heavily between them. Lena's hand found Ethan's, squeezing it tightly. She knew the stakes. They were no longer just fighting for the future of her people. They were fighting for the soul of Nebulin 6. Harlow's voice broke the silence once more. You have one chance to reconsider. If you agree to the terms we've laid out, we can make this process painless for you. Otherwise, I'll be forced to take matters into my own hands. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Ethan could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He knew that Harlow wouldn't hesitate to use force if it meant securing the resources he craved. But the Lumina weren't going to back down, and neither would Ethan. We won't let you destroy this planet, Lena said, her voice unwavering. We will fight to protect it, no matter what. Ethan stepped forward, his jaw clenched, his gaze locked on Harlow. This ends now, Harlow. You and your company will leave. If you continue, you'll have a war on your hands, and we'll fight to the last. For a long moment, Harlow stared at them, his eyes narrowing. He seemed to weigh his options. But in the end, his expression hardened. So be it, he said coldly. You're making a grave mistake. But I'll let you have your little rebellion. Don't say I didn't warn you. With a sharp motion, Harlow turned, signaling his team to move. As they began to leave, Ethan felt the weight of what had just transpired settle on him. The battle had only just begun. Lena, standing beside him, turned to look at him, her eyes filled with both fear and resolve. We've just made them our enemies, she said quietly, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. And now we fight for everything we believe in. The Lumina warriors gathered behind them, their expressions grim but resolute. The first shot had been fired. The final confrontation between the Lumina, the Azure Phantom, and Nexus Industries was inevitable, and it was coming faster than they had ever expected. The battle to protect Nebulin 6 from Nexus Industries was no longer just a physical fight. It had become a spiritual one. Ethan Cross and Lena had come to realize that the planet's true strength lay not in its weapons or its warriors, but in the deep, almost mystical connection that existed between the Lumina, the Azure Phantom, and the planet itself. This bond was what held the world together, and it was what would ultimately protect it from the greed of Nexus Industries. As the days passed, the situation grew more desperate. Nexus continued its relentless excavation of the Luminite, and the environmental damage was becoming more evident. The Lumina tribe, having tried every other method to stop the corporation, had reached a breaking point. Their culture, their way of life, and the very land they had protected for millennia were now under threat. But Lena had an idea, one that would take Ethan and her on a journey deeper into the planet's spiritual heart than they had ever gone before. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Lena took Ethan by the hand and led him toward the sacred cave. A place deep in the jungle where the Lumina's connection to the planet and the Azure Phantom was strongest. It was a place no outsider had ever been allowed. A place where the true power of Nebulin 6 lay dormant, waiting to be awakened. "I've been here before," Lena said quietly as they entered the cave, the air cool and filled with the faint hum of the planet's life force. "This is where the first Lumina commune with the land. This is where the bond with the Azure Phantom began." Ethan followed her deeper into the cave, his footsteps echoing softly in the quiet space. The walls of the cave were lined with veins of luminite, glowing softly in the dim light, casting an ethereal blue glow over everything. The mineral seemed to pulse with life, a heartbeat of the planet itself. As they walked, Ethan felt a strange sensation, like the very ground beneath his feet was alive, aware of their presence. "The luminite isn't just a resource," Lena continued, her voice filled with reverence. "It's part of us, part of the Phantom, and part of the land. The connection between the Lumina, the Azure Phantom, and Nebulin 6 is deeper than you can imagine. It's a bond that can't be broken. But if Nexus keeps pushing, they'll sever that bond, and we'll lose everything." Ethan nodded, his mind racing with the gravity of her words. "So what can we do? How do we stop them?" Lena led him further into the cave, stopping in front of an ancient stone altar. The altar was covered in intricate carvings that depicted the history of the Lumina and their connection to the land. In the center of the altar was a large shard of luminite, glowing with an intensity that almost seemed unnatural. Lena knelt before it, and Ethan followed suit. "We must connect with the spirit of the land," Lena said, her voice low and steady. "The luminite has a consciousness, a life force. If we can awaken that force, we can protect Nebulin 6 from Nexus. The Phantom, the land, and the Lumina, all of it is connected. But we must be unified." Ethan knelt beside her, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure he fully understood what Lena meant, but he could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a spiritual connection, it was a plea for help. A call to the very core of the planet itself. Lena placed her hand gently on the shard of luminite, her bioluminescent markings glowing brighter as she did. "The Phantom will hear us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to trust in the bond that connects us." Ethan hesitated for a moment, but then, guided by Lena's calm presence, he placed his hand on the shard as well. The moment his skin touched the luminite, he felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't a physical sensation, it was a deep, spiritual pulse that seemed to resonate with his very being. He could feel the land, the creatures, and the Phantom itself, all intertwined in a web of life and power. It was as if the entire planet was breathing in unison with him. Lena's voice broke through the connection. "Now, we must focus. Think of the Phantom. Think of the luminite. Think of Nebulin 6. Let the land know we are its protectors." Ethan closed his eyes, and for a moment, the world around him seemed to dissolve. He wasn't just a human on an alien world, he was part of it, connected to it in a way that transcended everything he had ever known. The Phantom, the land, and the Lumina were one. It was a bond that had existed for eons, and it was stronger than anything Nexus Industries could destroy. As they meditated, focusing on the pulse of the planet, Ethan felt something shift within him. He understood now, this wasn't just about fighting Nexus. It was about restoring the balance, about protecting the spirit of Nebulin 6. The bond with the Azure Phantom wasn't just a tool for survival, it was the lifeblood of the planet. And now, he and Lena had to defend it. Suddenly, Ethan's mind was filled with an image, the Azure Phantom, standing tall in the jungle, its violet eyes glowing with power. It was as if the creature itself had heard their call, had felt the connection between them. The Phantom was not a mindless beast, it was a guardian, a protector, and it would fight to protect Nebulin 6. Ethan opened his eyes, breathless from the experience. He turned to Lena, his gaze filled with newfound understanding. The Phantom, it's ready. We're not alone in this fight. Lena nodded, her eyes glowing with a mixture of awe and determination. Together, we can protect Nebulin 6. But we must act now. As they stood, the energy in the cave seemed to swell, as though the very earth was awakening. They could feel the connection between them, the land, and the Phantom growing stronger with each passing second. The battle against Nexus Industries was no longer just a war for resources, it was a battle for the soul of the planet. And with the power of the Luminite and the Azure Phantom on their side, Ethan and Lena knew they could win. As they left the cave, the world around them seemed to hum with energy, the connection between them and the land now stronger than ever. They had awakened the spirit of Nebulin 6, and it was ready to fight. The battle for the planet had only just begun. But now, they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of Nebulin 6, for the legacy of the Lumina, and for the love they had found amidst the chaos. The final confrontation with Nexus Industries had been intense and fraught with danger. But the Lumina, with the help of Ethan and Lena, had prevailed. The mining equipment that once tore through the land now lay abandoned, disabled by the power of Nebulin 6, a life force, awakened through the spiritual connection forged by the Lumina, the Azure Phantom, and the land itself. Ethan and Lena stood together in the heart of the village, looking out over the land they had fought so hard to protect. The once oppressive hum of the machines was now replaced by the peaceful sounds of the jungle, the calls of alien birds and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The air was thick with the scent of the earth, as though the planet itself had exhaled a collective sigh of relief. Nexus Industries, having failed in its mission to exploit the planet's resources, was retreating. Their forces, once so sure of their dominance, were now scattered, their plans shattered by the united front of the Lumina and the spiritual power of the planet. The leaders of Nexus, including Victor Harlow, had been forced to retreat, their arrogance and greed unable to withstand the power of Nebulin 6 inhabitants and their connection to the land. Lena stood beside Ethan, her hand resting in his. The bond between them had grown deeper over the course of their struggle. A connection that had not only been forged in battle but in shared understanding, mutual respect, and, ultimately, love. The bond between them was not just personal, it had become a symbol of the unity between the Lumina and the human who had come to their world as an outsider but had found a place in their hearts. It was a bond that transcended cultural differences, species boundaries, and even the very idea of what was possible. Ethan looked at Lena, his eyes filled with both awe and affection. "We did it," he said quietly, as though the weight of the moment had not yet fully settled on him. "We protected the planet. We protected your people." Lena turned to him, a smile softening the features of her face. "We didn't just protect it, Ethan. We awakened something within it. We've learned to live with it, not just on it, and that's the real victory." The Lumina had gathered around them, their faces filled with relief, pride, and gratitude. They had faced an enemy far greater than they had ever imagined. But in the end, they had triumphed, not through force alone, but through their unity and the powerful spiritual connection they shared with their land and the Azure Phantom. Chief Marcus Thorne approached, his broad shoulders relaxed for the first time in many days. His eyes were filled with warmth as he looked at Ethan and Lena. "You have shown us something we could not have understood on our own," he said, his voice deep and full of respect. "The true strength of Nebulin 6 is not in its resources, but in its people, its creatures, and its connection to the land. You have helped us protect that, and for that, we are eternally grateful." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "I may have come here as an outsider, but I now know that this world has become as much a part of me as it is of you. I won't let anyone harm it again." Lena's gaze met his, and in that moment, there was no need for words. They had both found something on Nebulin 6, a love that went beyond what either had ever imagined. A deep connection not just to each other but to the planet itself. It was a love that bridged worlds, cultures, and species, and it had become the foundation of everything they had fought for. As the days passed, the village began to rebuild. The Lumina restored the balance that had been threatened by the arrival of Nexus Industries and the Azure Phantom. Once a symbol of fear and hostility, now roamed freely, its bond with the Lumina stronger than ever. The planet had healed, But the lessons of the battle would remain with them forever. Ethan and Lena spent their days together, learning more about each other and the world they now shared. The mission had long since been completed, but their journey was far from over. They had both come to understand the true meaning of peace, not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of respect, trust, and understanding. It was a lesson that would guide them in the years to come. And so, as the sun set over Nebulin 6, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ethan and Lena stood side by side, ready to face the future together. They had fought for the planet, for the Lumina, and for each other. And now, they would live for it, together. Their love had become a symbol of peace, a beacon of hope for a future where different cultures, different species, and different worlds could coexist in harmony. It was a love that would endure, not just between them, but between the Lumina and the human who had come from the stars, and between the people of Nebulin 6 and the very land that had given them life. The battle had been won, the planet had been saved, and love had become the greatest force of all.